Bathroom Breaks and Bedtime Tales presents Business in San Antonio, Grady Hart, Episode 4, Part 4, by Sevastian Winters. The sun had barely crept above the Texas horizon when Grady Hart, Sam Rawlins, and the girl they had taken to calling the girl since she'd yet to offer her name, rode toward San Antonio. She kept to herself on the trail, saying little and casting sidelong glances their way. Her defiance was her armor, as thick as any iron, but Grady and Sam weren't the types to pry, at least not more than she was willing to let on. "So, San Antonio," Sam muttered, spitting into the dust. "You sure that's where you're from, miss?" She tightened her grip on the reins, her jaw setting. "Sure as I can be," she replied. But something in her tone made Grady's eyes narrow. Grady gave her a long, steady look, but didn't press. He'd dealt with enough drifters and lost souls to know the look in her eyes, a look that knew both hurt and how to hide it. He also knew better than to dig too deep. Sometimes people only spilled what they had to when cornered. And Grady figured her story would come out in its own time, maybe in a way she hadn't planned. As they rode into San Antonio's edge, the dust gave way to cobblestone streets and clusters of adobe buildings crowded with early morning market stalls. Vendors called out, their voices mixing with the clamor of horses' hooves and the chatter of townsfolk. The town was alive with movement, alive in a way Grady hadn't seen since the war. He guided Crow through the bustling streets, Sam and the girl trailing close behind. She looked around, a mix of longing and caution flickering across her face. Grady caught her eye, but she looked away, pretending to study the vendors selling roasted corn and leather trinkets. "Any particular spot you had in mind?" Sam asked her. She shifted in her saddle, her gaze fixing on a low stone building near the town center. A sign swayed in the breeze, weather-beaten and barely legible. "Los Arcos Cantina," she murmured, voice barely above a whisper. Grady exchanged a glance with Sam, but said nothing as they tied up their horses. The cantina's interior was dimly lit, thick with the scent of stale whiskey and smoke. A few rough-looking men lounged at tables, nursing drinks that looked as bitter as their expressions. As the trio walked in, the room went quiet, eyes narrowing in their direction. The girl led the way, her shoulders squared, her head held high as she approached the bar. The bartender, a wiry man with a scar running across his forehead, gave her a cold look. "You're back," he said, voice low and edged with warning. The girl didn't flinch. "Got a problem with that?" "Depends," he drawled, setting a glass down with a soft clink. "Last time you were here, you left some unfinished business." Grady and Sam exchanged a glance, but kept their distance, watching the scene unfold. Grady's fingers rested near his gun, a habit he didn't plan to break anytime soon. The bartender's gaze shifted to Grady and Sam. "These your new protectors?" She smirked, a hint of pride flashing across her face. "Something like that." The bartender's snare twisted, but his eyes held a glint of something darker. "Might want to keep a closer watch on her, boys. She's got a knack for trouble." Grady's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "We all got a knack for something. Question is, what kind of trouble's worth risking life and limb over?" The bartender's gaze flicked between the three of them, his sneer fading into a thin, humorless smile. "Ask her. She's the one with unfinished debts." The girl's jaw tightened, and for the first time, Grady saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the same defiance she wore like a second skin. "Whatever I owe, I'll handle it." The bartender's smile grew, a predator who'd cornered his prey. "Oh, you'll handle it all right. The bosses are been waiting for you." Grady's eyes narrowed. This unfinished debt got a name? A bartender chuckled darkly. "Santos, and he don't take kindly to runaways." Grady's jaw clenched. He glanced at the girl, who had gone pale but still held herself tall. Her hand brushed her waist, where a small knife was sheathed. "You could have told us, miss," Sam murmured, his voice soft but laced with disappointment. She didn't meet his gaze. Didn't think it mattered. Grady sighed, his eyes hardening as he looked at the bartender. "Where's this Santos?" "Out back," the bartender replied, his voice a quiet challenge. "But I wouldn't recommend paying him a visit. Men like Santos don't take kindly to interference." Grady's mouth curved into a grim smile. "Neither do I." With a nod to Sam, Grady turned and strode toward the back door, his boots heavy against the wooden floor. Sam gave the girl a long look before following. She hesitated, but fell in behind him, her steps lighter, though Grady could feel her tension like a storm cloud. The alley behind the cantina was narrow and dim, the smell of garbage and stale beer filling the air. A group of men stood in a loose circle, their eyes cold and sharp. In their midst was a tall, lean man with dark eyes and a wicked scar stretching from his eyebrow to his jaw. "Santos," Grady said, his voice steady. The man's gaze shifted, his mouth curling into a sneer. "You got business here, stranger?" "Reckon we do," Grady replied, his voice low and dangerous. "Seems you got some unfinished business with our friend." Santos looked past Grady to the girl, his sneer widening. "Ah, the little runaway returns. Thought you could just waltz back into town without paying your dues?" Grady's hand hovered near his Colt, his voice calm. "Dues are getting settled right now." Santos chuckled, the sound low and menacing. "You got guts, I'll give you that. But I don't deal with hired guns. She owes me, and she'll pay me, one way or another." Grady took a step forward, his eyes never leaving Santos. "You're dealing with me now, and I'd suggest you choose your words carefully." Santos's men shifted, their hands moving toward their own guns. The tension crackled in the air, thick and deadly. "I'm giving you one chance to walk away," Santos said, his voice dripping with malice. Grady's reply was a bullet, the sound deafening in the narrow alley. Santos staggered back, clutching his shoulder as blood seeped between his fingers. His men froze, caught off guard by the sudden violence. "Next one goes between your eyes," Grady said, his voice as cold as the steel in his hand. Santos's sneer faltered, fear flickering in his eyes. He glanced at his men, who looked uncertain, their hands hovering over their guns but not daring to draw. "You don't know who you're messing with," Santos spat, his voice trembling. Grady took another step forward, his gaze unyielding. "Reckon I don't care." The girl moved forward, her eyes blazing as she faced Santos. "You wanted payment? Consider this my goodbye." Santos's sneer returned, though weaker now, a man grasping at the last shreds of his pride. "You'll regret this." "Maybe, but you won't live to see it." He raised his Colt, and for a moment Santos's bravado crumbled. But before Grady could pull the trigger, Sam stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Let him go, Grady. Ain't worth it." Grady hesitated, his jaw clenched. Then, slowly, he lowered his gun. "Get out of here, Santos," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "And if I ever see you near her again, I'll finish what I started." Santos didn't need to be told twice. He staggered back, his men falling in behind him, their eyes darting between Grady and the girl as they disappeared into the shadows. Grady holstered his Colt, turning to the girl with a hard look. "You've got a lot of explaining to do." She met his gaze, her defiance returning. "Guess I do, but I didn't ask you to step in." Grady's mouth twisted into a grim smile. "Maybe not, but here we are." She looked away, her shoulders slumping slightly. "I never meant to drag you into this." Sam chuckled, his voice softening the tension. "Too late for that, miss. Now you've got two shadows to keep up with." A faint smile tugged at her lips, though her eyes remained wary. "I guess I should be grateful." Grady gave a slight nod. "Reckon you should." The girl stood still for a moment. Grady turned back to her. "You comin' or what? We got business of our own in Laredo. I reckon, since you gotta go somewhere, you may as well come along with us. You any good with that knife?" The girl's facade crumbled just for a moment, and then her face turned back to rigid steel, her gaze 1,000 yards long. "That ain't something a smart man needs to be asking." "Huh, that's what I figured," he replied. "I was just making sure." He motioned her to come along. 20 minutes later, as they began their slow ride out of town, Sam turned to the girl and said, "So, sweetheart, do you got a aim?" She stayed silent, but locked eyes with Grady. For a moment, neither said anything. Grady broke the silence. "Sam, meet Defiance. I suppose that's as good a name as any." The girl nodded her approval. "Defiance will do just fine," said Sam. They made the last turn toward the southern road out of town. Laredo was still ahead, and Grady felt the weight of the road pulling him forward, with Defiance riding by his side.